It is my absolute privilege to welcome you all on behalf of the Center for Media, Data, and Society. My name is Kate Coyer, and I started with the center full-time the year John and Ellen arrived in Budapest. So from a media scholar perspective, it was kind of the ultimate twofer. But for those in the field, in our field, her work as a journalist, as a scholar of the media, and an institution builder is renowned. Her Knight Foundation study, the Media Missionaries, which assesses what did and did not work in American support for independent journalism around the globe, is required reading in the field of media development. She wrote in 2004, quote, "The stakes are rising. Since media are so important to acquiring and maintaining political power, and since economic health is linked in part to information access and digital technologies." Words that could not be more true today. I'm going to further embarrass Ellen a little bit by mentioning some of her many professional achievements, because there are so many, and they highlight the range of the ways in which she's made a difference. For the last 7 years here at CEU, she has served as the Annenberg Fellow in Civic Media for the Center, and as an advisory council member for the Center for International Media Assistance in Washington, D.C. Before coming to Budapest, she was a research director at MIT Center for the Future of Civic Media, and has served as executive director and senior fellow at Harvard Shorenstein Center on the Press, Politics, and Public Policy. She also founded the Center on Media and Society at the University of Massachusetts, Boston, where she created the New England Ethnic News Wire. Prior to her academic appointments, she was a journalist with a career spanning over 20 years. During this time, she was a White House and political correspondent for the Wall Street Journal, national reporter for the Los Angeles Times, and a regular commentator for PBS and CNN, and also started in local media, and her commitment to local news and community is so much a part of the work she continues. She's also served as executive director of PBS's Democracy Project, where she developed special news programs that encourage citizen involvement in public affairs. She holds a BA in American History and Literature from Radcliffe College and honorary doctorates from Kenyon College and Daniel Webster College. I want to share some of the most incredible stories of Ellen's and of the news she's covered at her time as a journalist, but I'm afraid you're going to have to read her autobiography to get those. During her time at the center, she's been a personal and professional inspiration and visionary for us, for all of us. For me personally, there are no words. She asks the tough questions, pushes us intellectually and organizationally to be better and stronger as scholars and as intellectuals, with humor, passion, and warmth. Not always easy, but with a commitment to excellence at its core. Now, there's no single way for us to fully express our appreciation for all she does, and will continue to do with us and in all the work she does back in Boston. Her unwavering support and dedication to journalistic excellence, her impassioned support for Roma initiatives and social justice, her support in furthering media and communication studies at CEU and internationally, her unwavering commitment to media literacy and education. But with this event, we would like to celebrate her together with you all who've had also the opportunity to work with her and get to know her in many different ways as well. And we thought the best way to do that was not with a lot of long speeches, though we can do that later once we have a glass of wine in our hand if anybody should choose, but with a thoughtful and reflexive and forward-thinking discussion about the future of journalism in the country that she's called home for the last 7 years. We spent a lot of time rightfully talking about the challenges here, but we wanted to turn the tables a bit and focus within this space of some of the innovation that is really reshaping the telling of the world we live in, both here and around the world. A will say more to introduce the panel in just a moment. But finally, in preparing these remarks, I was reminded of a couple things that Ellen has drilled home in various ways over the years, and I went back and read some of your very eloquent writing on the future of news media, and I just wanted to share a couple of these quotes in closing from Ellen. "My bottom line has always been, how can people understand their real choices for shaping their own lives and communities? How can the flow of news actually promote personal and community agency? This is why the future of journalism and civic media are important to me." "Critics said I seemed disrespectful and biased. I thought it was our job to ask uncomfortable questions, not to seek accolades as celebrity pundits in a patriotism contest. We asked unpopular questions in order to hold the powerful accountable. And finally, we need to apply these new media affordances for civic good. How can people build cultural practices that use communication technologies to best advantage personal agency and healthy communities all around the world? Let's all keep working on that, even as we see the terrible and stirring pictures and words coming out of, and I'll take the liberties to update this too, of Orlando, of Syria, and of places in crisis. All those words never more true than now. So we celebrate you with substance, Ellen, and I turn it over to my colleague, Eva Bognar, the panelists. Thank you all for joining us.
Thanks, Kate, for the introduction, and thank you all for coming this afternoon. My name is Eva Bognar, and I am with the Center for Media, Data and Society at the School of Public Policy here at CEU. As Kate said so eloquently, we are here to celebrate Ellen's time in Budapest. And when we were thinking about how to do that, we were contemplating all sorts of topics we thought were interesting and relevant to Ellen's interest, but we haven't found the right one just yet. Then, without realizing it, as so many times before, Ellen came to our rescue. At the end of a completely unrelated meeting, she just burst into this a very enthusiastic speech about how Hungarian investigative journalism is resisting pressure and fighting back, and what a great job these journalists are doing under very difficult circumstances. So Kate and I looked at each other and knew this was the topic on which we should focus today. So thank you, Ellen, once again. So here we are with our distinguished guests to discuss new trends in journalism in Hungary, focusing on innovations in investigative journalism and the journalism NGO sector. As many of you know, we regularly organize and participate in events that tackle the threats to freedom of expression and to journalistic work globally and in Hungary in particular. We discuss governmental clampdown on NGOs, issues related to ownership, state capture of public service broadcasting, surveillance, tabloidization of news, soft censorship, the distorted advertising market, and other highly problematic media regulation, etc., etc. Though today we explicitly want to concentrate on the innovations and the new trends in journalism in Hungary, it is important to keep in mind the environment in which these new trends are taking place. One, because these constitute the daily circumstances in which journalists operate, and two, because some of the innovations may be interpreted as a response to these challenges. Now, without further ado, it is my immense pleasure to introduce our panelists today. Nick Thorpe is the Central Europe correspondent for BBC News. He joined the BBC in 1986 as Budapest correspondent and was the first Western correspondent to be based here, and has continued to report on Eastern Europe ever since. Ilona Moricz is the director of the Center for Independent Journalism, a Hungarian media development NGO, which has the mission to promote quality and ethical reporting, and which supports independent journalism in Hungary. Gabriella Manuli is Deputy Director of the Global Investigative Journalism Network, an association of more than 100 non-profit organizations in 40 countries that is dedicated to investigative reporting. And she earned her MA in public policy at the Media Information and Communications Policy specialization here at CEU. Tamas Bodoky is Editor-in-Chief of Hungarian watchdog NGO Atlatszo.hu, and Balazs Weyer is co-founder of Direct 36, a non-profit investigative journalism center in Hungary, and also the chairman of Hungarian Editors Forum. So thank you very much for joining us today. And we are planning to have a lively discussion here, and then open it up for questions and comments, which I'm sure you will have. So I will start off with a question that I hope many of you are interested in. I personally am very much interested in, and that is, why do you do the work that you do? So what brought you to work with the organizations, or lead or found the organizations where you work, and why here, why now? What are your personal motivations that drive your commitment in the field? If there's anyone who wants to start, Balazs?
No,
Thanks.
I might, and maybe it's the first time that I am talking about this, that it's, well, journalism is an addiction. So it's like a drug addiction. Think about that. So my parents told me not to do this. And then first I was introduced to it by a friend, and I instantly felt that I need more. And ever since I need more, and I always need to feel the highs. I felt cooler. After that, first I just was a consumer, then I became a distributor, then a producer. Sometimes you get questioned by the police. And you just can't stop. I've tried it a few times. I've tried to get rid of it, but it's just stronger than me. So, yeah, that's the main cause, that it is an addiction. It gives you, it provides you with a perspective of the world and of all things in life that you are become addicted to, because you feel that you have something to do about the community. You really feel the flow when you're on the right track. Also, there are the times of frustration when you fail with a story, when you feel that you can't solve this problem, you can't prove a fact, you can't cross-check it, and then in the end, sometimes if you insist, you find a solution. Maybe just after years, but those times of the flow, they are worth it.
Thank you.
Yeah, first I would like to make a comment that I'm very happy to see that for once we have a table with like more female than men, and I think it's not by chance, that it's because of Helen and then Kate, and so I'm happy it's not so often that this happens. So, and I also find this question very interesting. Nobody asked me when you go to a table, you just round table, or you speak at a conference, it's just you talk about what you do, but now why you do what you do. So in my case, it's like a two-way, because first I was a journalist myself, and now I kind of move to the NGO, so I'm doing more of that work, and I'm not reporting anymore, and I have to confess that I don't miss reporting. I like it a lot. It was great, more than 10 years of my life, but somehow I feel like now I can do more from this side of the table. I'm still working every day with journalists. I'm still sometimes writing stuff, but I'm not doing investigations on my own. But our organization is trying to help investigative journalists, but not just investigative journalists, any journalist, citizen journalists, etc. We are trying to provide resources, and we are trying to help them. And it's so inspiring to see every day people from different countries contacting you and being there and trying to help at different levels. We are growing, we are having more and more members, so. And then also why I do what I do, and here in Hungary, then it's also mixed with personal life, that is also mixed with investigative journalism, because, full disclaimer, my husband is one of the founders of Direct 36, so he's also an investigative journalist, so it's a mix. But anyhow, today I'm going to talk more about global issues, because my knowledge of Hungarian journalism is limited to mostly our two members that are Direct 36 at Atlatszo. They are members of the Global Investigative Journalism Network, and they are doing a great job, and we are very proud of them.
Can you say a few words about the network?
Yeah, sure.
What you do there?
Yeah, so I'm deputy director, so mainly it means that I do a little bit of everything. Because we are a small non-profit with a small staff, but mostly our members are organizations that promote investigative journalism around the world. So our members are not individuals, but organizations, NGOs or centers that do investigative journalism at universities. Now we just joined, we have new members, and we are up to 138 members in 62 countries. And then we also organize global conferences. Every 2 years, we have the next global conference will be in Johannesburg, South Africa next year. And this year in September, we will have the second Asian Investigative Journalism Conference in Nepal, Kathmandu. And we have a website, gijm.org, and we are on social media, on Twitter at GIJM, Facebook, and you name it, we are mostly everywhere. I'm trying to stop opening more social media accounts. I'm battling, trying not to do Instagram. And there we provide resources, we share expertise, we connect journalists with each other, we have a very good listserv where journalists help each other, so basically that's what we do.
Thank you.
Thanks. Well, just to strengthen Gabriella's point about the female contingent on the panel, I think I'd better start with my grandmother. and my grandmother lived to a ripe old age. She lived to 101. But I remember one conversation with her when she said that she was in service. And I hesitated to understand that phrase. And of course, it meant she was a servant. In an upper middle class household. And I've had the privilege to be working for a public service broadcaster. So I think what most of my career as a journalist, and I think, you know, it's rather, if we're talking about innovation today, it's actually rather an old-fashioned phrase, but perhaps I'm an old-fashioned or an old journalist in this panel. But I like the idea of service, of public service, of even journalists who are not working for a public service broadcaster or media, serving the public. And I think this is very much in tune with the quote which Kate read out from Ellen about holding the powerful accountable. Who do we serve? In Eastern Europe, there has been a tradition of serving those in power at different times, not just in Eastern Europe, but I think at its best, journalism in this country or elsewhere kind of serves the public. You identify, and of course the public votes in different directions at different elections, but that's what keeps me in journalism. That's what inspires me, the idea that what we write, what we report might be useful to the wider public. There's, again, an old poem of Bertolt Brecht's from the 1953 Stalin Alley, in which, I can't remember the exact words, but it goes something like, it has been said that the people betrayed the trust that the party placed in it. And Brecht continues, perhaps the party should dismiss the people and elect a new one. And so here we are, journalists trying to hold the powerful accountable. And apart from serving the public, of course, we have to have some fun. So what I enjoy doing most as a journalist is kind of crossing those front lines. And for that, I think we need to keep a certain distance from what's going on. I'm a little uncomfortable, I'm sure we can talk about this more, with citizen journalism, with journalists as activists, because I think that the danger with that is that it may undermine our objectivity or our ability to cross those front lines and go and question anybody, whatever they think, whoever's in power, which party, or so on. That's just a kind of question to throw out. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you for your question.
I would like to refer to remarks by Gabriella and Nick. On one hand, I was a journalist, and I still miss reporting, but I had to reconcile the situation when I came to work for the Center for Independent Journalism, that I can't reconcile both reporting and working for an NGO. So it's a full-time job, so after more than a half year of considerations, I decided to work for this NGO, which I find a very rewarding job. So even if I don't do journalism anymore, but at least I work for journalists, and we try to do good. for journalists, which is, I think, a very broad goal, of course, but every month, every day is different, and it still gives a lot of inspiration for me. And by our work, we also try to reclaim serving public interest in media. I think it's quite important, and according to our strategy, we are trying to relaunch journalism in its classical sense through digital skills, through innovation, what is possible, through distributing and sharing knowledge among journalists. And we do it together with our allies from the West reporting newsrooms in Hungary and also abroad. So from the very beginning, it was very important to have an international and Hungarian pool of professionals involved in our work. We worked with US trainers for many years. We worked with the BBC trainers for at least 5 years, and we have a lot of alumni who visited and graduated from these courses. And I am very proud of our PROMA program, the Media Internship Program, which has been the longest such an initiative in Europe. We wish only that we could continue. And I think that's what my previous professional journalistic career helps me a lot. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so I became an investigative journalist before I founded Atlatszo.hu, the investigative journalism NGO, and I thought it is important because before that I could feel how important investigative journalism is in a country where political corruption and abuse of power is very often taking place. So I guess in my earlier job at Index, I did a lot of such stories and contributed to the defeat of some social liberal governments, which I think is an achievement because they had issues. But at the same time, I think that there is no such thing that pro-government investigative journalism, and that's something what is this current government is trying to do now, that they are funding media with huge amount of money to constantly investigate anyone who might criticize them. And that's a very worrying phenomenon, because that means that a lot of media outlets and journalists are working basically for the government, and they're funded by the government. And that hurts the principle of separating the branches of power. So at Atlatszo, we aim to remain very critical to whatever government we have, and to counter this type of government propaganda, which is overwhelming the Hungarian media space. And I'm very proud that this was the first investigative journalism non-profit in Hungary, founded in 2011. And at that time, everyone was like, oh, this is a nice try, but it will not succeed. And everyone said that you need a solid background to do this kind of job. You need a big company which supports this type of work, and so on and so on. And in spite of these doubts, we could be successful, and now even others are implementing the same model here in Hungary, which I think is a great success for us too.
Thank you. I don't know if you want to react to anything that someone else might have said. I have questions, of course, but if you want to, okay. So I would pick up on this objective way of doing investigative journalism versus the more activistic way of committing acts of journalism, as Alan put it at one point. And we have different models here on the panel. So Nick is working for a public service broadcaster, a traditional news outlet in a lot of ways, and I will be very curious to hear how and whether they innovate and they feel like they need to innovate. Balazs is a journalism center, does, from my perspective, and correct me if I'm wrong, very traditional investigative journalism in a very innovative setting. So in a way, this is my understanding, what you produce is fairly traditional. On the other hand, how you produce it is not necessarily. So I'm wondering what you think of that. And also we have on the other end of the table, Tamas. And Atlatszo.hu, I don't know how much you all know about Atlatszo, but they develop a lot of interesting platforms and tools for citizens to get more engaged and to, in a way, contribute to the watchdog function. So their investigative journalism may be, and this is a question to Tamas, of course, objective, but on the other hand, they are trying to blur the lines in a lot of ways between citizens or audiences and journalists and editors on the other side. So I'm wondering what you all think of these different models and ways of journalism, and whether I did justice to your to your work.
Yeah, there's a lot of talk in the past decade about how quickly journalism is changing, and that's true on the one hand, but I believe that if we say that journalism is changing, that can become kind of an excuse to give up some principles. And I think it's important to believe that it's not the mission that has changed, not the mission of journalism that has changed. Some ways and means of journalism changed, but it's not exceptional. It happened again and again in the past century. So I don't think that we have to throw out everything, all those professional, ethical, whatever principles that quality journalism has been based on. So yes, in this sense, we want to follow and maintain those traditional journalism, and yeah, we are quite hardliners, so to say, in maintaining the divide between facts and opinion, content and advertising. So all these very important, for me, very important rules, and this includes excluding activism of our efforts. So activism is all right, but I don't think it should be done by journalists. So what journalists produces can fuel activism, of course. So the information, the facts, put together, the stories shared can be powerful in triggering activism. But that's not a stage, and we are not playing on that stage.
Several things here. In terms of innovation at the BBC, I just did a piece the other day from Bulgaria on the refugee, the migrant situation, where within 2 minutes, 40 seconds, we had 3 drone sequences with it. And so, I mean, that's very hard for kind of more traditional journalists like myself to kind of get used to talking to a little thing buzzing in the air rather than to a camera straight in front of my face. And you never quite know when the little camera's pointing at you, and it takes a little bit of practice. It's up on the BBC website. You can see whether I succeeded or not. Looking at the whole, I think one could take a concrete example of whose agenda are we working to. Obviously, looking at the migrant crisis now, it's a very strong part of the narrative of the current government in Hungary and a number of governments across Europe and political players in all of this, that the migrants somehow are coming because they've been organized, that the smugglers are persuading them to come, or Mr. Soros is persuading them to come, or God knows who is persuading them to come. But I think as an investigative reporter myself, I've been doing quite a lot at the moment on the smugglers themselves and also on the police investigating the smugglers. And again, it's kind of fun as a journalist to talk to a policeman one day and a smuggler the next. And hoping that neither of them is tapping your phone in the process. But I think it is an interesting aspect of the migrant crisis at the moment, to explore this issue, and it's a useful form of investigation because so many people have reasons for saying what they're saying, and I just for one was curious about who, to what extent people leave their homes because the option is there, because there's a man in Kandahar or in Suleimania, offering them that possibility. And I think, and at the same time, it's also interesting to put a question, as I did to Zoltán Boros from the Hungarian police, the investigative side of the NNI here, the other day, of surely your actions in making it harder for people to cross into Hungary are pushing people into the hands of the smugglers. If you really want to put the business model of the smugglers out of action, surely you should just take down the fence, lay on public transport and so on. And he said, because he's not a politician, he said quite honestly, yeah, there is truth on both sides of that. He admitted in that interview that it's true that while he justified also the existence of the fence, there is this aspect of their work that he's uncomfortable with himself as a serving police officer. And likewise, when you put the question to the smugglers about the well-being of the people they care for, you get very different answers. So there's a lot of, the field is really wide open to investigative reporters, and that's why it's so exciting to be a journalist.
Tamas, do you want to?
Yeah. So Atlatszo has not only one mission, but multiple missions. So one of them is investigative journalism, in which we commit to the traditional values Balazs mentioned, and we stick to the principles of investigative journalism. But at the same time, we are a grassroots organization. We have a lot of supporters, and we do involve in some sort of activism, like freedom of information activism, which comes in a form of a freedom of information request generator put online, and everyone can use it and file requests to the government. And it helps journalism too, because sometimes people ask better questions, citizens. The average citizen asks better questions than the professional journalists. And since all the requests and answers are published, it can give us some ideas if something is going on, and we can dig deeper into that. At the same time, we are committed to this grassroots thing in funding as well. So Atlatszo is approximately 50% funded by the audience. So the audience donates in a regular way. And there are many other ways, like we do involve in lobbying for better laws, like better laws for journalistic source protection, which was successful after we filed some claims to the Constitutional Court, and they did change the media law at the end to grant more protection for journalist sources. We do advocate for better freedom of information legislation. That has not been so successful because the government tries to do something against the requests, and they try to curtail legislation. But I guess that since we are a watchdog NGO, we need to engage in some level of policy making and grassroots activities.
I think probably also among the walls of this institution, but also at many conferences, both international and domestic ones, we discussed new trends in investigative journalism, and Gabi will probably, and also Tamas and Balazs talk more about, or probably can talk more about them than me, but definitely we are witnessing a surge of new tools in digital journalism that is changing our profession very quickly. And especially investigative reporting as a journalism genre that was before has developed tremendously. And we are facing totally different questions than 5 years ago when, for instance, citizen journalism sources were looked upon as very dubious sources. Now they are a daily fact of newsroom reporting and editing. And as, for instance, our organization is organizing workshops on how to interpret these sources, for instance, how to verify images, how to check facts, how to use data journalism tools. We involve, of course, Tamas and Balazs and other colleagues in this work. So I think it also shows that there are many trends, and when last December we organized a conference on, it was titled Journalism in 20 Years, I think it was a too ambitious title, and of course the outcome was what we expected. Nobody can tell. Nobody can tell what it will develop, what way, how it will work in a profitable way. So apart from various tools, we also face the core question, how to sustain journalism, how to sustain media industry. And I think that's what we are trying to find answers to, but that makes probably the life of journalists all over the world, not only in Hungary, very difficult. I've just heard from a colleague in the US whom I met 2 weeks ago that 1/3 of journalists lost their jobs in the US over the past 10 years. So we don't have such statistics, but I would say we find a lot of people in PR and communication and other fields, and I think it would be good to keep them for the best of the profession. I probably diverted myself from the original topic, but trends in journalism and investigative reporting.
Yeah, basically now I don't know what to talk about, if objectivity or new trends, or I can just mix a little bit. First of all, I think I don't support an elitist idea of investigative journalism, because I also think that being 100% investigative journalist is a luxury. In a lot of countries, in a lot of places, you just can't be an investigative journalist full time. There are no resources. You need to do your stories. And I see that in our conferences, that sometimes we have 1,000 journalists, and a lot of them, I would say, I don't have the statistics now, but a lot of the reporters, more than half of them, they are beat reporters. They are like, no, if you can say in a way, normal reporters that from time to time, or they want to learn or they want to improve, and sometimes they don't have 3 months to do an investigation, but they can apply basic investigation techniques in their daily story, or they can wait and do 2-3 days and mix investigative journalism with normal journalism, and also think that the tools are there and everybody should be able to use it. So if there are citizen journalists that want to engage in an investigation, we are doing our best to share everything we can with them, videos of the conferences, tutorials. So I really support that everything should be free and for everybody. In an ideal world, it would be nice to have real investigative journalists that just can commit 1 year to investigate. And also because sometimes, on the other hand, people think that investigative journalism is just digging a little deeper, and no, don't confuse, like, the real tradition of investigative journalism, you really have to find a secret, you need to dig, you need to do a lot of stuff, but still there is a mixture in between. And I think that the idea that now the tools are available for everybody, and also what I might talk later about this, but this new way of working as a network, not by chance, you have the Panama Papers, and journalists are trying to let aside, if they can, a little bit their ego, because journalists, or journalists in general, they have a big ego in general, and they want to think that they are the best. Yeah, believe me. I think you work with them daily. But that's changing, because now they are realizing that you can't know everything. Like, you can be the best reporter in the street and be the best at interviewing people and get something, but maybe you don't know about spreadsheets, and you don't know about databases, and you need a tech guy that maybe it's bad at interacting with people and don't have any clue of how to get something out of an interview, but is the best at digging. So now you can't afford to work alone anymore. I think more and more we are going towards this collaboration, and the tools are there. So that's my optimistic note. But on the other hand, as you have more and more tools available and everything, the backlash against investigative journalism, it's also getting huge. So.
Gabi and others as well, would you talk about, because we've been touching upon tools and digital and other technologies, and a little bit about the organizational structure, though I would love for you to talk about that a bit more. But I'm wondering if you could talk a bit about different partnerships. So partnerships between organizations, between media outlets, between different professions, and also these global networks, and how they help or how they encourage investigative journalism. And this is for everyone, because I think you all work in all sorts of partnerships, and how much of it is a new trend and how much of it is just the same old. So Gabi, do you want to start?
Yeah. Well, our organization has different kind of members. So some of our members are a network itself, like the Organized Crime and Corruption Reporting Project, that it's a network in Eastern and Central Europe. Then ICIJ, the Investigative Consortium of Investigative Journalists, they are the ones behind the Panama Papers. And they've been working like this for some years, and it was getting bigger and bigger. They started with investigations maybe with 10 or 12 journalists in different countries. And now the Panama Papers, I have the numbers here because I didn't want to forget, but you had 370 journalists from more than 100 media outlets in 80 countries, and the number is growing because they are opening up, and now a lot of the data, not everything, but a lot of the data is public, so everybody can try to go and dig. And so I think ICIJ is a great example of how things are changing, and I know it firsthand because a lot of the journalists come to our conferences and they have meetings there, because I still think that face-to-face, it's really you can feel in our conference how stories are getting read, are getting, like someone says about a topic in a room, and then I'm from that country and I know about this. So then there are a lot of there are funds and money that you can apply to do transnational investigations. So there are a lot of things. We also try to list as many grants and fellowships available as possible and try to connect people. So I think it's very nice to see how it's changing, and of course there are problems, and imagine dealing with 370 journalists, trying to get 370 journalists to hold a story to release all together. That's crazy because that's the agreement. If you work with this network, you start working, you have to share. You can't get a finding and try like to keep it just for yourself. You have to share, you have to network, and then you have to sit on the investigation and wait till they say, okay, let's go and do it. But it's amazing, they could do it. And in the few cases where it didn't work, okay, then this organization or this media outlet or this journalist in this country won't be part of the next investigation. So I think it's a good model.
Well, for me, talking about new professions, new networks, new mashups of different skills and institutions, probably the most important is that as the stories and our attention span becomes shorter and smaller, and the media consumption moves from the desktop to mobile, which is even smaller than the desktop, we need to find new ways to tell stories, and that's because, well, more important the story is, usually the more complex it is, and you need, bigger space, longer texts to tell that story, and that's the opposite of the current trend, and that means that the more important the story is, the less attention it can attract, which is, well, on the long run, it's lethal. So the most important thing for us is to find ways to make these stories fancier, sexier, with visual enhancements, visual stuff, and that's why we need a lot of ID skills. Journalists need ID skills, I guess. Need skills to adapt quickly to new technologies, like Nick talking to the drones, and yeah, big respect that you're keeping up with technology like that. I've never tried that yet, and we need all these small and new ways to be able to tell stories, not just the traditional long texts or long reports, talking heads, wherever. And we need to be able to work together with other kinds of people, like the IT guys, for example, like graphic designers. We need those skills, at least to the extent to be able to communicate with other professions creatively. And another trend is that data becomes more important, and that's because more data in the world is available than ever before, because it's accessible, it's digitized, so we can easily use it, and that's really a big potential for journalism. So the quantity of data in the world doubles every year, because everything is data these days, and if you if you look at it from the right angle, the data itself can tell stories. But to visualize the data, we also need other kind of skills. And the third very important trend is that as the money, the people, the information flows easier and faster around the world than ever before, we need to network and contribute internationally more than ever before, because both the money, the people, and the information can be anywhere, and we might need local expertise, knowledge, people with local networks to help on these stories, and we need to help them, of course, as well.
I just pick up one thing to agree with Balazs there, that the story about, as we're talking about innovation today, about the challenge of telling stories in a new way. And again, I can't remember who it was talking about humility before, that something we're being encouraged to do at the BBC more and more is actually to shut ourselves out of our own stories, to have more and more self-authored people, so to look for people with a story to tell, and then simply to film them and edit them, telling that story. So I don't know if anyone saw, one of the most popular things on the BBC website recently was Syrian children talking about their experiences. And these are back-to-back stories. There's no reporter there, though obviously the reporter took the trouble, took the risk to go to those places and film those and edit them very well together. But they're amazing tales of individual Syrian children talking about their life and times. And also, for a lighter example, on the Brexit referendum issue in Britain, the most recent piece I've done on that was an interview with a man who manages a company which imports huge quantities, 100 tons of used clothes from Britain every day. Okay, 100 tons a day. He has a factory in Székesfehérvár. I was interviewing him about that because it was kind of interesting, the whole Használtruha used clothes business. But then, just as I was leaving, I asked what he thought of the whole, how, if Britain were to vote to leave the European Union next week, how that would affect his business. And he gave obviously a very passionate argument for Britain to stay in. And so I went back and filmed that, and it's a 68 second piece. It took me the best part of a day to make it, but it kind of looks good, and the BBC will put that back to back with arguments for and against by businessmen in Britain and across Europe, and that's the kind of storytelling that the new technology and also the new thinking is helping us to do.
Anyone else wants to? Tamas? No, not sure.
Yeah, I guess so. This international cooperation of journalists is really very important. When I started to become part of these journalist networks years ago, it helped me a lot. Like I was finding offshore companies which I didn't even knew if it existed, and people teach me how to track them down, and then I could cause a lot of troubles to some oligarchs here because they could never imagine that some journalist will find these offshore companies. So I guess it's very important. And the problem is that the Hungarian journalists are rather competitive. They are not into cooperation that much. So one of our aims is to change that a little bit, because journalists usually come to us when they get in some kind of trouble, like legal trouble, or they want to have more IT security on their devices, and then they know Atlatszo has good lawyers, and Atlatszo knows how to encrypt your hard drive and so on, and then we try to advocate to Hungarian journalists to cooperate more and share this type of knowledge with each other, and not to be so very competitive and resisting any cooperation with each other.
I think the collaborative journalism culture is very important as an important trend of the investigative reporting all over the world. And I agree with Tamas and also with Balazs and Gabi that we would need to strengthen it in Hungary too, because it's really not really a characteristic for our profession, but I think we have good examples, we have good practices, what we can share. And I see some good signs. So all the workshops we announced on either protection of sources or digital security or data, how to use databases or public information requests. And we are going to have a summer camp on data journalism. I think they also show that there is a high interest among journalists, among media students. So there is hope that a new generation is more interested in this type of collaborative work. And I am quite optimistic. Last year, I heard a very interesting phrase from David Lee of The Guardian, who said that investigative journalism is like blind man's bluff between sharp blades. And I think it's true. Nevertheless, as we hear from Gabi, we have more than 100 non-profit-based organizations specializing in investigative journalism all over the world. They are networks, they are actually associations of journalists. So the hunger for good reporting and doing investigative reporting, what the media companies tend to lose already, especially because of the time-consuming and very expensive, very high expensive. So it's moving to the non-profit world. It also raises, of course, questions about how to fund these organizations, where they can receive funds from, and transparency is a key issue of all these new endeavors. I don't know if how long it can be continued. I think governments and the media industries must, professionals must look into this issue, whether we lose this whole genre to the non-profit world, or we still keep it within the boundaries of the media industry, which is itself also changing, but I think it raises real issues.
Thank you. And I want to add something to what she mentioned, like the importance of crowdfunding in all this movement. And you have here two great examples. Both Atlatszo and Direct 36 did very successful crowdfunding campaigns, more than one. Direct 36 did two, and I don't know how many Atlatszo did.
We do it continuously. So.
Yeah, they are always like having the open donation or crowdfunding, but I think it's not by chance. I think it was what happened with the refugees here in Hungary. I think it's connected with that. You see all these citizens that are really angry, and they are luckily turning this anger into something nice, like trying to support and trying, like what you see when you saw all these people going to the streets and helping people, and you saw that same situation with these two crowdfunding, angry citizens trying to give money, even if it's just 1,000 forints, 500 forints, whatever, but trying to give money and say to these people, please do something, please investigate and show how corrupt these politicians are.
In the name of inclusiveness, I think I'm going to ask our audience if we have any questions and comments from the floor. And of course, you'll have more time to elaborate on. So any questions or comments? I'm sure. Yeah? In the end? Okay. Dean also had a question.
It's always Ellen who asks the most pertinent question, and I also cherished her habit to have the first question, but I'm sorry. But if she insists, right? I have just one question, because what Ilona said grabbed my attention. Yes, less and less resources for investigative journalism. While it remains the same expensive business because of the time it needs, because of the connections, the networks it needs, the data mining it needs, etc., etc. And she said, governments have to look into this. They do. The problem is that the more investigative journalism is dependent on outside benevolent sourcing, the more it is non-profit, the more it is moving into the non-profit domain, the more governments are not just happy to look into it, but they are grabbing this opportunity to label it as agency of others, of enemies typically. So how these people believe this can be fought, this problem?
May I just? Of course, I didn't mean that governments look into the ways it's done, but I think for any country it will pose a problem how to. What I mean that media industries are in trouble all over the world, also in our countries, and I don't mean the government interference, of course, in this field. I am not for regulation or any other means, and we are all somehow victims and labeled by the present government, so it's, we know what you might have meant by this. I think in general it is a problem for democracy. It is a problem that the media companies are not able to perform certain duties of journalism because of the high costs. Just again to mention The Guardian, I've just heard that its investigative team is not dispersed, but they don't have an investigative team anymore. They may have some other ways, but they are also, as a big company, are wondering how to fund a very important feature of Guardian, which makes it a flagship of investigative reporting. So I think it's a broader term, what I meant that government must look into this.
Specifically, crowdsourcing, is it an alternative, is my question. Is crowdsourcing an alternative?
I think crowdfunding, because crowdsourcing is more for the stories,
yes,
but
exactly.
I think crowdfunding is an alternative, but not on its own. You can support a non-profit like this 100% on crowdfunding. It's simply impossible, and also crowdfunding it's a task that takes so much time. We did a crowdfunding campaign at GIJN, and it's amazing the amount of time it takes, and you need a team working on it, and you need to constantly push on social media, and so I think crowdfunding is an alternative, like an extra source of revenue, and at the same time with crowdfunding you are getting your audience being connected with your project and feeling part of your project, so you are getting like a constituency and support, but of course, you have examples like the correspondent. I mean, there are a few examples all over the world where they could support 100% on crowdfunding, but I think those are exceptions and not the norm.
Dean had a question. Do you still?
Yeah, sort of on the same theme. Yeah, I mean, like this is a great event, and I'm glad we're able to have it for. In Ellen's honor. Yeah, I mean, you know, when it comes to independent journalism, I'm greedy, and I want the organizations to be large and robust. And the Atlatszo story is so interesting because you know, it does divide up its revenue sources among three pillars, largely, and one of them significantly is readers. On the other hand, it's a small organization considering the market. It has about a dozen staffers, I remember.
Not even a dozen.
Right, and when I worked for a newspaper in the U.S. that had a dozen staffers for a city of 30,000 people, this is a city of market of 3 million. And so, and obviously there's, so, I mean, I guess all of us are, you know, I guess there's no question here, but kind of an observation that it's clear that, to me anyway, that the commercial models on the internet are just not able to support organizations of any size, and it won't for the foreseeable future unless somebody tells me that there's points to something that there is. And when you talk about government has to look into it, I actually wholeheartedly agree, because it feels like as a sort of a public good and a public utility, there has to be ways for public policy to fund independent media and investigative journalism at scale. there's no question there, but that's just, I just don't see, if anybody else sees another way out, I'd love to hear it.
I go first. So on the one hand, I don't think that there is no potential commercial model for online media. There is something out there. We just haven't found it yet. But there has to be something. And I very much think that that profitability of the media is very important, not because of the money, but because it guarantees independence. The independence and the has decreased the vulnerability of the media here especially, but elsewhere too, has increased a lot since the crisis, because the profitability disappeared on the media market here for most of the media companies. And that leads to, well, owners who are more open to compromises, who are willing to sell their ownership for cheap, for those who don't want to make money with their media ownership, they want to make money with something else, and they can use their ownership in the media to support that business or that goal. So that's why to find a profitable, sustainable model would be very important. Crowdfunding is, I think it remains, at least for a while, a boutique thing. So it can support organizations like ours, which are small and luxury, as Gabi has put it. But philosophically, it's more important because of the bonding, the deeper bonding, all that has been already mentioned. So every penny that comes through crowdfunding, it counts 3, I guess, at least.
I would just say that in my dream model is for news organizations to be 100% reader supported, because there's no conflict whatsoever. And when maybe somebody will find the formula there, but again, we're so far away from it that in the intermediate term, I worry.
So I guess there are some other stakeholders here who could contribute, like there is, for example, nowadays investigative journalists do a lot of investigations into fraudulent spending of European Union funds. So we put, so there is a constant lobbying at the EU level, at the European Parliament level to fund more investigative journalism, because that could benefit the European taxpayer by getting fraudulently spent money back. And my other example would be, like in the United States, if you are a whistleblower and you contribute to expose a fraud or waste of public goods or whatever, and then the state can recover some of the assets, then you get a percentage of that. And that could be a good model for financing this kind of investigative journalism, because when we constantly expose fraudulent spending and things like that, and then if there is any asset recovered, it should go to a fund to finance this kind of activities. So just ideas.
Yeah. Peter had a question.
I wonder how do you see the role of access to information, because new technology, of course, allow people to leak information more effectively and more widespreadly, but then they may go to prison, or they may need to hide somewhere from prosecution. So an access to information law would provide the legal space where investigative journalists can just access things and make it public, and And it seems that it's an encouraging field, including what has been happening in Latin America, starting in a way with the Claude Rias case, which first recognized access to information as an international human right. So do you see it's encouraging and helping investigative journalism, or you see some backlashes in this field as well?
Who wants to take that question?
Well, yeah, because I don't have a long answer. Yeah, basically for us, access to information is one of the pillars, and it's really important. The more information, the merrier. And we are also like access to information, and also that the data is presented in the right way, that a lot of organizations and are doing lobby for that, and they are doing a great job, like trying to also see how open data can be improved, and trying to move from just PDF or whatever, or trying to make sure that governments and corporations are sharing the information in a way that you can work with that. So, yeah.
Just what I see from my experience, that more and more journalists use the tool of access to information and public information requests in their reporting in the research phase. So 5 years ago, it was not the case. Now